Okay, so this is about Austrian economics. How many of you have had some experience with that? Only two or three? Okay. It's not Australian, it's Austrian. This lecture is one that you can watch a fuller version of it, and you'll understand what I mean by that in a couple of minutes, by a gentleman named Roger Garrison. And so I want to start by acknowledging the things that Roger has done. He has this marvelous book that I understand took him many years. I don't know how long. Maybe Cecil or Tyler knows how long it took him to write it.
Oh, he was working on it 33 years ago.
Yeah, it was a long time coming. But but in any event, he's written this book, Time and Money. And all the figures that I put in this talk were stolen. Well, not stolen. He puts things there for people to use. So we're taken from his work. And there's a picture of Roger. All right. Now Roger took a lot of his ideas from this gentleman. Anybody know who he is? It's not me. Tyler said I looked like him, so I had to shave. So you wouldn't say, no, that's you. Yes, sir.
It's Hayek.
Yeah, Friedrich Hayek. Okay, so Garrison borrowed a lot from, and in fact, Garrison's lecture, this is a very nice point that Hayek makes, I think, and it's sort of the way to structure a lecture, or it's now the way that it's gotten in my head that that's the way you ought to structure a macro course too. So before you ask how things might go wrong, you want to explain first how they could go right. And so if you think about the training of physicians, they teach the interns and the young physicians and the medical students, they teach them how the body is supposed to work before they have the student repair something. So I kind of got started with this Austrian stuff about 6 years ago. I wanted the money to teach a summer course, and the only course available was 202, which is the macro course. And usually I'm a micro guy, but I thought, I'll take the money. So, but I really I had taught macro so many times in a way that I thought was totally dishonest. Just basically mercenary. You teach the usual spiel and then you're done. And it's that aggregate demand stuff that really bothered me. Let me tell stories with aggregate demand. That was the kind of stuff I used to do. And then, so I said I would teach this class, and then I was stumbling around the internet looking for material, and I stumbled upon Garrison's webpage, and he offers all of his PowerPoints and just all kinds of resources. So, and then I bought his book, and it became possible for me to retrain myself. And I think of it more as deprogramming than retraining. So I was programmed to think with this demand management kind of approach. And now I've been at this for a while, and I'm a self-trained Austrian, not like Tyler. He's a really specially trained Austrian, but I'm a self-trained guy. Now, if we were in a we weren't in a socialized institution, probably this thing wouldn't be set up like this. It would be set up so that I could face you and talk. I wouldn't keep turning my back on you, but this is a socialized institution, so, you know, we expect the dean not to do the right thing. I mean, we expect things to be screwed up here. Now, the question is then, if I'm saying this and I work here, then why would you be interested in hearing what I have to say? You might think about that. Well, the answer is I'm tenured. Which is the reason why I can, you know, make snide comments about the dean or the provost or the president or whatever.
I do, yeah.
And why in fact it is my job to say things that are critical of the administration. But that's a different story. That's a lecture that would be fun if you would get Coelho. That would be a wonderful lecture for him. Although I think he wants to give a lecture on his book about disease, which is a good lecture too, but I don't know, the one on tenure would be fun too. I'd definitely come watch that one. Well, there are four facets of this theory, and there's a production possibility curve that's central to it, and in most standard macro textbooks, you do not find heavy usage of production possibility curves. The usual macro textbook will have a review of micro section, and they'll have a discussion of a production possibility curve in the review of micro, and you'll never see that production possibility curve again in the macro section. I almost said sexton or something. I don't know. Came out of my mouth wrong. Freudian stuff. But anyway, the thing that's amazing to me is that you almost never see these things. But the Austrians, Garrison and the Austrians, and the classical economists were emphasize this kind of a thing because a production possibility curve is a trade-off. It shows you a trade-off. So the whole cornerstone of Austrian macro, it's about trade-offs. Wow. How refreshing. Macro theory based upon the idea that there are trade-offs. Wow. When you're manipulating those multipliers, you kind of lose sight of that, right? But let's see what the multiplier is. Let's see what the government spending multiplier is, with or without taxes. You ever done that stuff? Not much of a trade-off going on there. Okay, so the other thing that's important is the market for multiple funds. Again, a concept very important to the classical economists and very important to the Austrians. It's also called the capital market. How could you possibly teach about capitalism without heavy emphasis upon the capital market? Strange, isn't it? How something. The Austrians throw in two other bits here. They've got stages of production which are important, but I don't have time to do all that without pushing my welcome. And so I'm going to leave that out. And stage-specific labor markets, I got to leave something out. So again, it's a trade-off. There's always I don't want to have death by PowerPoint. That's where you glaze over, and I'm clicking, and you're going. Yeah. I know what it is because I'm on this committee where I have to go in and watch young faculty, and a lot of times I'm sitting in the room and they're clicking through their PowerPoints, and the students are going. PowerPoint, I like PowerPoint, but you've got to do something else. It's not enough just to have everything there. Click, 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 click. No, it's not good. Okay, so I'm going to try to make it a little fun. Hope none of you have a heart condition, because this gets exciting here. All right. So those, do you see that? They disappeared. Do you see it? Watch they disappear. You're gone. The end of those. Okay, so we're going to talk about this one first. Production possibility curves. Okay. Okay. In this model, the trade-off between consumption, expenditure, and investment. And so there are three possibilities here that that we see. We see. Let's start with the middle one. So if it's possible for you to focus on that one. The idea of no growth in this model is that no growth occurs. This is about the width of the. If I move it this way, it would be exactly the width. Yeah, there we go. It's not quite right there, but it's there. Anyway, this distance. Let's suppose that this represents depreciation. So in this economy, in this middle economy, this is depreciation. This amount of money. In this economy, the investment during the year exactly replaces the stuff that wears out. That's how you get a no-growth economy. Every year, start with the same machines. Every year, start with the same capital equipment. Wash, rinse, repeat. Okay? Nothing happens. This is time period 0, time period 1, time period 2, time period 3. Are you getting tired of that? Time period 4. Do I have to keep going? Do we have any math econs in the room that want me to keep going to n? I mean, okay. So, and then we could do other things. You go over here, and you can see that in time 0, that's I could use fancier stuff here. Like that. Time 0. That's time 0 there. In time 0, the amount of investment out here exceeds the depreciation. Right? So this is time 0 investment. This is depreciation here. And so investment exceeds depreciation. So that means that next year I'm going to start with more capital equipment. And that's the idea of how you get growth. Start with more equipment. Now, there's no free lunch in economics. You've all heard that, but there's no free growth in Austrian theory either. And so, if you notice, the vertical height of this dot exceeds the vertical height of this dot. What does that mean? Well, that means that what we did to convert this diagram into this diagram is we started here, we moved over here. We moved down along this production possibility curve in time 0 to a dot like this. We started up here, now we moved down here in time 0. And what that means is that in order to get the expenditure to have more equipment, we had to give up what? Current consumption. Had to give up some current consumption, right? So then we're off to the races and we start going like that. Over here, time 0, you can see what happens. Compare the height here to the height over there. This is taller. This dot has more altitude than this dot. If you can't see that, you need to go to your optician. Okay. What does that mean? Well, that means that these guys are having a party. It's party time over here. But this is like okay, you're going along in school, but then you decide to go on spring break. You got a spring break. You get a lot of consumption. It's a great time. But you come back and you're hungover and you got to go to the health center because various things that happen you can't talk about. Right? So, then you're going to have a collapse. Then your grades are going to plummet that time. You thought you were pretty smart having a big party going on in the break. Watch out for that. I had a fraternity brother who died on spring break. That's how serious my fraternity was about spring break. We actually died there. But anyway, so now is where it's going to get a little bit more exciting. okay, who is this guy? It's not Survivor Man. It looks like Survivor Man, but it's not. Anybody know who this guy is?
Robinson Crusoe.
Robinson Crusoe, Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks did a thing like that, sort of. What was the name of the movie?
Castaway.
Yeah, Castaway. That's what Crusoe was. He was a castaway. And this is the classic picture of Crusoe. It's his self-made umbrella and so forth. And he's staring off into the distance, looking for hopefully somebody to come rescue him, right? But then I found another image that I thought would go more with my lecture. I wanted to show you that one because that's the classic image. But then this one was more like what Alfred Marshall would be interested in, which Alfred Marshall had this famous textbook about the principles of economics where he talked about the definition of economics was man and it was the study of man and the ordinary business of life. And so this next picture catches Crusoe in a rather mundane activity, milking a goat. He's a primitive agriculturalist. That's the image that I wanted to use to help you understand Austrian theory, not the goat, but the primitive agriculturalist. And so keep this one in mind for a moment and let me go back to this thing. Now here in the middle we have Crusoe in his no growth economy, in his no growth state. And what I imagine, my analogy is that Crusoe, he has a bag of seeds to start with. Gets some things off the boat, okay, like Hanks did. So he's got this bag of seeds, and he plants those seeds, and then he harvests the crop. And then the question is, what's he going to do with the harvest? Now, if he puts exactly the same amount of seeds back in the bag that he planted, that's what's going to happen. Right? Every year he starts with the same amount of seeds. So if he eats enough so that he's got the same amount of seeds every year to start, he's got a no-growth economy. Now, how in the world could Crusoe get himself to a growth economy? How could he get that to happen? Can he continue to eat the same amount every harvest? No. He's got to do what with his consumption? Reduce it. He's got to reduce his consumption. That's what this is. Okay, start here, no growth. Okay, if I reduce my consumption, I've got more seeds. What's he going to do with those seeds in the spring? Yeah. He's going to break more ground, and he's going to plant those seeds. His harvest is going to get bigger. And as long as he's got the habit of putting more seeds back in the bag every year than he started with the previous season, he's going to have a growth economy. That's what that is. And it doesn't just work on Crusoe. It worked in post-World War II Japan, too. At a much higher, or Hong Kong. The textbook I use, Bade and Parkin, in one of my classes, has comparative production possibility curves showing that the people in Hong Kong have a higher savings rate than the people in the United States. And then they compare these things on a per capita basis. And today, and in those pictures, they had, I think, 1970 and then maybe 1990, and the per capita consumption in Hong Kong was still behind ours. But now the per capita consumption in Hong Kong is greater. How did they get there? Well, they have a higher savings rate. So this stuff plays out not just in little pictures and stories that I tell about Robinson Crusoe, but actually plays out in the world too.